The 911 dispatcher hears a man screaming into the phone. "My wife and son have been shot. Please hurry. They're dead." Police race to the scene expecting to find a grieving husband and father. What they don't know is that the man making that call is the killer. And in exactly 13 months, a 56-second video his son recorded moments before dying would expose him as one of the most cold-blooded family annihilators in American history. His name is Alex Murdaugh. And this is how an 86-year dynasty collapsed because of one Snapchat video. If you're into true crime where privilege collides with justice, like, share, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell because I'm breaking down every lie, every piece of evidence, every shocking detail. Let's get into it. June 7th, 2021, 8 p.m. The Murdaugh family sits down for dinner at the Moselle estate, their sprawling 1,700-acre hunting property in South Carolina's Lowcountry. Alex, his wife Maggie, and their 22-year-old son Paul eat chicken together. It's a normal family dinner. Conversation, laughter maybe. None of them know this is the last meal the three of them will ever share. Within 90 minutes, two of them will be dead. And the third will be their killer. Maggie Murdaugh, 52 years old, had driven in from the family's beach house on Edisto Island earlier that evening. She and Alex had been having serious problems. She'd been staying at the beach house for days, essentially separating from Alex. But he called her that afternoon and asked her to come home. He said his father was ill and they needed to visit his mother together that evening. Maggie made the hour-long drive. She didn't even bring her purse or an overnight bag because she thought this was just a quick visit. She planned to return to the beach house after seeing Alex's mother. She had no idea she would never leave Moselle alive. After dinner, around 8:30 p.m., Maggie walks down to the dog kennels with Paul. They're feeding the animals, checking on a dog named Bubba who has an injured tail. It's a beautiful June evening, hot and humid like every South Carolina summer night. At 8:44 p.m. and 55 seconds, Paul pulls out his iPhone and opens Snapchat. He starts recording a video to send to his best friend Rogan Gibson. The family's dog Bubba is acting crazy, running around with a guinea fowl bird in his mouth. Paul thinks it's funny. He wants to show Rogan. The video is only 56 seconds long. Paul has absolutely no idea this video will solve his own murder. He has no idea his father is about to kill him. At 8:49 p.m. and 1 second, Paul's phone locks for the final time. The screen goes dark. According to the prosecution's forensic timeline, sometime between 8:49 and 8:53 p.m., Paul received the first shotgun blast. He's standing near the feed room entrance, probably still looking at his phone or about to put it away, when someone approaches him with a 12-gauge shotgun loaded with buckshot. The first shot hits him in the chest. The impact at close range is absolutely catastrophic. He falls near the feed room. His phone is found partially under his body. And then comes the second shot, this one to his head at point-blank range. The blast is so close, so devastatingly powerful, that it essentially destroys Paul's skull. Brain matter, bone fragments, and blood spray across the kennel area in a horrific pattern. Some of the biological material lands on a nearby quail pen 15 feet away. When investigators arrive, some deputies get physically sick at the scene. Maggie hears the shots, two deafening blasts in rapid succession, echoing across the property. She starts running not toward Paul but away from the shooter, toward the main house, toward safety. Her Apple Watch is recording her heart rate and movement. She makes it approximately 30 feet from the kennels before the shooter catches up with her. This time it's a different weapon, a .300 blackout rifle. The first shot hits Maggie in her left thigh as she's running at full speed. She crashes to the ground face first in the grass. Blood spatter analysis would later show she tried to crawl or move toward a nearby tree. But the shooter walks up and stands directly over her. One shot to her back, another to her torso, then two final shots to her head. Cold, clinical, methodical. When it's over, Maggie Murdaugh lies dead in the grass, her blood soaking into the South Carolina soil. Her Apple Watch records the exact moment her heart stops beating. Here's what's chilling. Both murder weapons came from the Murdaugh gun room in the main house. Someone selected two specific weapons, the .300 blackout rifle and the 12-gauge shotgun. They returned to the kennels, and they executed two people. The weapons have never been found, presumably disposed of somewhere on the massive property or in one of the surrounding swamps. There's another detail that's notable. The family's dog Bubba was found locked inside a bathroom in one of the kennel buildings, separated from the area of the killings. Investigators believe this was deliberate, the action of someone who knows the property and wanted to prevent the dog from interfering. At 10:07 p.m., over an hour after the murders, a frantic 911 call comes in to Culleton County Dispatch. It's Alex Murdaugh, Maggie's husband and Paul's father. He's breathless, panicked, seemingly devastated. "My wife and child have been shot badly," he screams into the phone. His voice cracks. He begs for help. Ambulances and police race toward Moselle. When Culleton County Sheriff's deputies arrive at 10:29 p.m., they find Alex standing in the driveway near the main house. Not down at the kennels with the bodies. Up at the main house. He's wearing a clean t-shirt and shorts. Not a single speck of blood visible on him anywhere. Deputies immediately notice this. They walk down to the kennels and find a scene of absolute carnage. Paul's body is so destroyed, so horrific, that seasoned law enforcement officers have visceral reactions. Maggie lies in the grass about 30 feet from the kennels, her body showing clear evidence of execution-style shooting. Two victims, two completely different weapons, two different calibers of ammunition, casings everywhere. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was taken. This wasn't random. This property is gated and remote. This was a planned, methodical execution. But who would murder a wife and son so brutally? Alex's clothes are spotless, completely clean, but Paul was shot with a shotgun at point-blank range. Forensic experts know that a shotgun blast to the head at close range creates massive blood spatter, blood, brain tissue, bone fragments spraying everywhere within a 10 to 15-foot radius. Anyone within that radius would be absolutely drenched. But Alex is clean. When detectives ask him about this, Alex explains he wasn't at the kennels when this happened. He says he was visiting his mother in Alameda, about 20 minutes away. He says he found the bodies when he returned home. He has an alibi, or does he? Because investigators are about to discover that Alex Murdaugh is lying about absolutely everything. Here's what investigators discovered when they conducted a forensic analysis of Alex Murdaugh's cell phone data. At 8:09 p.m., his iPhone locks and goes completely still. No calls, no texts, no apps opening, no screen touches, nothing for 40 minutes straight. Alex would later claim he was napping on the couch in the main house during this time, exhausted from the stress of his dying father, just taking a quick rest after dinner. But here's the massive problem with that story. At exactly 8:49 p.m., the precise moment Paul's phone goes dark forever, Alex's phone suddenly springs to life. It records 240 steps in rapid succession. Someone is moving fast. At 8:50 p.m., the phone shows orientation changes consistent with someone getting into a vehicle. At 8:51 p.m., Alex's Chevy Suburban starts moving. GPS data from the vehicle's OnStar system tracks his exact route turn by turn. He's driving away from the kennels, away from the bodies of his dead wife and son lying in pools of blood. But here's where it gets absolutely sinister and reveals the planning involved. At 9:02 p.m., Alex's vehicle is traveling south on Highway 61 toward his mother's house in Alameda, about 20 minutes away. But something else is moving with him at exactly the same highway speed Maggie's iPhone. Even though Maggie is lying dead back at the kennels, her phone is traveling in perfect tandem with Alex's Suburban. The GPS data matches perfectly. The phones move together, traveling at the same speed, making the same turns, for several minutes. At 9:06 p.m. and 17 seconds, along a rural stretch of Salkehatchie Road, Maggie's phone suddenly stops moving completely. All activity ceases. It's been thrown from the vehicle into the thick roadside brush where it would be discovered the next day by investigators searching the route. Alex is disposing of evidence in real time, creating confusion, trying to scramble the timeline. It's the move of someone who thinks he's smarter than the police. At 9:22 p.m., he arrives at his mother's house in Alameda. Libby Murdaugh is 79 years old with late-stage Alzheimer's disease. She can barely recognize her own children. She won't remember if Alex visited or not. She cannot be a reliable witness. Alex stays for exactly 21 minutes. The caregiver on duty, Shelley Smith, would later testify at trial about this visit. She said Alex seemed extremely agitated. He kept looking at his phone obsessively. He seemed distracted and nervous. This visit serves absolutely no legitimate purpose except to create a timeline that puts Alex away from Moselle during the time of the murders. On the drive back to Moselle, Alex makes a calculated series of phone calls to Maggie's phone 3 times. Once at 9:04 p.m., again at 9:08 p.m., and again at 9:35 p.m. He knows she won't answer because she's dead. He killed her. But he needs those calls in the phone records. He needs to look like a concerned husband wondering where she is. It's all staging, all performance. At 10:01 p.m., he arrives back at the Moselle property. And here's what's absolutely critical to understanding his guilt. For the next 5 minutes, he doesn't call 911, doesn't run down to the kennels. Cell tower data and his phone's activity patterns suggest he's moving around the property, walking, checking, making sure the scene looks right. At 10:07 p.m., Alex finally calls 911. What follows is truly the performance of his life. He's breathless, panicked, hyperventilating. But notice what he doesn't do. He never asks the dispatcher what he should do. Never asks if he should perform CPR. Never begs for faster help. It's almost like he already knows with absolute certainty that there's nothing anyone can do, because he made absolutely sure of it 90 minutes earlier. When deputies arrive at 10:29 p.m., they find Alex wearing completely different clothes than he wore earlier that day at dinner. Multiple witnesses would later testify that Alex was wearing a specific outfit at dinner with Maggie and Paul. But now he's in a fresh, clean t-shirt and different shorts. Not a drop of blood anywhere on him. Why does this matter so critically? Because Paul was shot with a shotgun at point-blank range. Forensic experts would later testify that the blood spatter from that headshot would have been massive and completely unavoidable for anyone within 10 feet. But Alex is spotless. His explanation: he wasn't there. But we know he was there at 8:44 p.m. We know the murders happened between 8:49 and 8:53 p.m. Investigators believe Alex went to the main house, stripped off his clothing, thoroughly washed, put on clean clothes, and disposed of the bloody evidence somewhere on the 1,700-acre property where it has never been found to this day. Investigators also found a blue raincoat at Alex's parents' house weeks later. Testing showed it had gunshot residue particles on it. When first asked about it, Alex claimed he'd never seen it before, didn't know where it came from. Later he changed his story and said it might be his, but he hadn't worn it in months. The changing story, the lies piling on lies. When investigators tested Alex's hands for gunshot residue that night, the tests came back negative. But forensic experts know that gunshot residue washes off easily with soap and water. Clean hands aren't proof he didn't fire a gun. They're consistent with having washed thoroughly. Maggie's sister Marion Proctor arrives at the scene around 11 p.m., hysterical with grief and shock. Alex approaches her in the driveway, crying, embracing her. "They're gone, Marion. They're both gone." But multiple deputies at the scene report something felt wrong about Alex's behavior. One deputy would later testify that Alex kept asking strange questions about the condition of the bodies. Questions that sound less like a devastated family member processing shock and more like someone verifying a job was completed properly. But investigators aren't ready to suspect Alex Murdaugh yet. He's a prominent attorney. His family has been prosecuting criminals in this area for 86 years. They're legal royalty. That hesitation almost lets him get away with it. But Alex made one critical mistake that night. A mistake he didn't even know he made. It would take investigators 13 months to discover it, but when they did, it would destroy him completely. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. To understand why Alex Murdaugh would murder his own family in cold blood, You have to go back 2 years before that night, to February 24th, 2019. It's just past 2 a.m. and 6 teenagers are flying across dark waters near Paris Island, South Carolina. They've been bar hopping in downtown Beaufort for hours, drinking heavily. Behind the wheel of the Murdaugh family's Sea Hunt speedboat is Paul Murdaugh, just 19 years old at the time and blackout drunk. His blood alcohol level would later be estimated at approximately 3 times the legal limit. His friends are begging him to slow down. "Paul, you're going way too fast. Let someone else drive." But Paul doesn't listen to anyone. The family had a nickname for him when he was drinking, Timmy, because alcohol completely transformed Paul's personality. Sober Paul was friendly, easygoing, likable. But drunk Paul was aggressive, mean, and dangerous. And that night, Timmy was fully in control. Connor Cook would later testify in depositions that Paul was so drunk, he was slurring his words incoherently. His girlfriend Morgan Dowdy tried multiple times to take the keys away from him. He shoved her away violently. But Paul was a Murdaugh. He'd been using a fake ID all night to buy drinks even though he was underage. And now he was piloting a boat in complete darkness at dangerous speed through treacherous waters. When it happened fast. The boat slammed into the Archers Creek Bridge, piling with devastating force. The impact was so violent that bodies were thrown through the air. Screaming, chaos, freezing February water. When the survivors pulled themselves to safety, someone was missing. Mallory Beach, 19 years old, beautiful smile, planning to attend college. Whole life ahead of her, gone into the black water. For 8 agonizing days, search and rescue teams scoured the waterways around Paris Island. Coast Guard boats, helicopters, volunteers, divers. Mallory's mother Renee waited on the shore day after day, praying for a miracle that wouldn't come. On March 3, 2019, 8 days after the crash, they found Mallory's body 5 miles downstream from the crash site. Her family's worst nightmare confirmed. What happened next showed the Murdaugh family's true character. The Murdaugh machine went into immediate action mode. Within hours of the crash, before the sun even rose on February 24th, Alex Murdaugh was at the hospital where the surviving teenagers were being treated for injuries. Not to comfort them, not to apologize, not to express remorse, to control the narrative and protect Paul. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Alex pull Connor Cook into a hospital hallway and coaching him on what to say, telling him to be vague about who was driving the boat, suggesting that maybe Connor should say he didn't remember clearly. Other witnesses said Alex was actively trying to make it look like Connor was the driver, not Paul. Alex even approached Mallory's grieving boyfriend Anthony Cook at the hospital and offered to help the family with anything they needed, all while knowing his son had just killed the girl Anthony loved. Paul was eventually charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence causing death and 2 counts of boating under the influence causing great bodily injury. But the Murdaughs hired the best defense attorneys money could buy. The case dragged on and on. Months turned into years. Delay after delay after delay. And while Paul awaited trial, living free on bond, the Beach family filed a massive wrongful death civil lawsuit. But this lawsuit wasn't just about money or justice for Mallory. The Beach family's attorneys demanded something Alex Murdaugh absolutely could not allow under any circumstances. Discovery. A complete forensic accounting of all Murdaugh family finances. Every bank account, every asset, every transaction. The Beach family hired forensic accountants specifically trained to find hidden money. Within weeks, maybe just days, Alex would be forced under oath to reveal his finances completely. And what those finances would reveal was a fraud so massive, so brazen, so extensive that it would destroy Alex Murdaugh completely. Because while Alex looked like a successful lawyer from a wealthy family, the truth was catastrophically different. The truth was Alex Murdaugh was completely broke. Despite earning over $250,000 a year from his law firm, despite coming from money, despite owning multiple properties, he was drowning in a sea of theft and lies that he'd been perpetrating for nearly 2 decades. And the Beach family lawsuit was about to expose all of it. Gloria Satterfield worked for the Murdaugh family for over 20 years, from 1998 until her death in 2018. She wasn't just an employee who cleaned and cooked. She was family. She helped raise Buster and Paul from the time they were small children. She was there for their first days of school, their birthdays, their graduations, every Christmas morning. The boys loved her like a grandmother. She loved them like her own grandchildren. In February 2018, Gloria was working at the Moselle estate. On February 2nd, something happened. The official story, the story Alex told, was that Gloria tripped over the family's dogs and fell down the front stairs of the house. But here's what's immediately suspicious. There's no incident report filed. There isn't 911 call made from the Moselle property. No investigation of any kind conducted at the scene. Gloria was simply transported by ambulance to the hospital with catastrophic head injuries. Gloria suffered severe brain trauma from the alleged fall. She never regained consciousness. For 24 agonizing days, she lay in a hospital bed in a coma while her sons Tony and Brian kept vigil. On February 26, 2018, Gloria Satterfield died. She was only 57 years old. And then Alex Murdaugh approached her sons with what seemed like genuine concern and incredible generosity. He told Tony and Brian they should sue him for wrongful death. He said it was his fault because it happened at his property with his dogs. He said his homeowner's insurance would pay out millions. He said he wanted to make absolutely sure that Gloria's boys were taken care of financially because Gloria had meant so much to the Murdaugh family. He even recommended his close personal friend Corey Fleming as the attorney to represent the Satterfield sons. What Tony and Brian didn't know was that Corey Fleming was in on the scheme. Together, Alex and Fleming orchestrated a complete fraud. They filed the wrongful death lawsuit. They negotiated with the insurance companies. The insurance paid out a total of $4.3 million. $4,300,000 that should have gone to Tony and Brian Satterfield. They never received a single penny. Not $1. Alex, working with Fleming and a corrupt banker named Russell Lafitte, stole every cent of that money. Alex created a fake business account using the name Forge, mimicking a real company called Forge Consulting that legitimately managed structured settlements. When the insurance companies issued checks, they were made out to Forge for the Satterfield settlement. Alex deposited those checks into his fake Forge account. And then he spent the money on his opioid addiction, on gambling, on maintaining his lifestyle and image of success. He forged documents. He created fake checks. He fabricated paperwork. And for years, he looked Gloria's grieving sons directly in the eye and lied to them. When Tony and Brian asked about their settlement, Alex told them it was tied up in probate, that these things take time, that there were legal processes that had to be followed. All lies, every single word. But Gloria wasn't Alex's only victim. This was just one scheme in a vast, sprawling web of fraud going back to at least 2005. Alex had been systematically stealing from his own clients, injured people who trusted him to fight for their rights. His method was simple but devastating. He would take cases for severely injured people, win substantial settlements, then lie to the clients about how much they were getting. The difference went into his fake Forge accounts. There was Hakeem Pinkney, a deaf man who was catastrophically injured in a car accident. Alex stole $309,000 from him. Hakeem needed that money desperately for medical care and living expenses. There was a quadriplegic man who needed money for 24-hour medical care, nurses, equipment, medications just to survive. Alex stole $1.3 million from him. Over $1 million from someone who couldn't even move. There was Natasha Thomas, brain damaged in a catastrophic wreck. She would never fully recover. She needed money for care for the rest of her life. Alex stole from her too. By June 2021, Alex Murdaugh had stolen over $8.7 million. Some estimates put it closer to $10 million. From his law firm, from his clients, from vulnerable people who trusted him, from a dead housekeeper's sons. He stole from everyone, and he had spent nearly all of it. His bank records showed he was essentially broke despite earning over $250,000 a year. And the walls were closing in from every direction simultaneously. The law firm's chief financial officer, Jean Seckinger, had been investigating missing money. She discovered serious discrepancies in client accounts and had scheduled a confrontation meeting with Alex for June 10, 2021. Just 3 days after the murders, the Satterfield sons were getting increasingly suspicious about their missing settlement. And most dangerously, the Beach family wrongful death lawsuit was days away from forcing Alex to open his books completely. Alex was trapped in a corner with absolutely no way out, unless he could create a tragedy so catastrophic, so devastating, so consuming that it would stop everything. Delay the Beach lawsuit, generate massive sympathy, make people forget about missing money. Buy him time. On June 7, 2021, Alex Murdaugh made a decision that would shock the world. He would murder his wife Maggie and his son Paul. Not in a rage, not in the heat of passion. In cold, calculated, premeditated desperation. For 86 years, from 1920 to 2006, the Murdaugh family didn't just practice law in South Carolina's Lowcountry. They were the law. They controlled it. They shaped it. They decided who got prosecuted and who walked free. 3 generations of Murdaugh men served consecutively as the Solicitor South Carolina's chief prosecutor for the entire 14th Judicial Circuit. Think about what that means. 1 family, 3 generations, 86 continuous years of power. Randolph Murdaugh Sr. was elected solicitor in 1920 and served until his death in 1940, 20 years. When he died, his son Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr. stepped into the role. Buster served as solicitor for a remarkable 46 years, from 1940 until 1986, becoming one of the longest-serving prosecutors in American history at the time. When Buster died, Randolph Murdaugh III, Alex's father, took over and served as solicitor until 2006. The 14th Circuit covered over 3,200 square miles across 5 counties: Allendale, Beaufort, Culleton, Hampton, and Jasper. Every murder trial, every major crime in that entire region for 86 years went through a Murdaugh. The Murdaughs decided who lived and who died in South Carolina's Lowcountry. They had that much power, that much influence, and everyone knew it. Judges knew it. Defense attorneys knew it. Law enforcement officers knew it. If you got on the wrong side of the Murdaughs, your life in that area was over. But the solicitor position was just part of the Murdaugh empire. The family also ran Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich, known as PMPD, one of the most successful personal injury law firms in South Carolina. Founded in 1910, the firm specialized in catastrophic injury cases, truck accidents, workplace deaths, medical malpractice. The firm was pulling in $15 to $20 million in revenue annually. The Murdaughs were rich, powerful, connected to everyone who mattered. Alex Murdaugh was born into this empire in 1968. He grew up watching his grandfather and father wield enormous power. He watched the rules bend for his family while others faced consequences. This shaped Alex's entire worldview. He genuinely believed he was different, special, above the law in a very real way. When the boat crash happened in 2019 and Paul killed Mallory Beach, what happened? Witnesses said Alex showed up at the hospital and tried to coach the teenagers. Did Paul go to jail that night? No. He went home. He was free on bond for 2 years while Mallory's family grieved. That's what it meant to be a Murdaugh. Consequences were for other people. For nearly 2 decades, Alex had been stealing millions from clients and nobody caught him. Why? Because he was a Murdaugh. When questions were asked, he'd deflect. He'd charm. He'd use his connections. He'd make problems disappear. And there's something else. Alex's father Randolph III died on June 10, 2021, just 3 days after the murders. He had been battling illness and his death, though expected, came at an extraordinary moment. Randolph died before he could be called as a witness in any investigation, before he could be deposed in the Beach lawsuit, before he could be forced to answer questions about what he knew. When Alex's walls started closing in during June 2021, he didn't think for 1 second that he'd actually face real consequences. He thought he could commit the ultimate crime and get away with it. Murder his own wife and son. Blame it on some mysterious killer. Generate massive sympathy. Stop the Beach family lawsuit cold. It's the arrogance and narcissism of someone who has never faced real consequences for anything. But Alex made one critical mistake in his planning. He forgot that technology has changed. Cell phones don't lie. GPS data doesn't care about your last name or your family's legacy. And most importantly, he had no idea his son Paul had recorded a video that would destroy him. A 56-second Snapchat that Paul sent to his friend Rogan Gibson. A video that Rogan happened to save before it disappeared like Snapchats normally do after 24 hours. If Rogan hadn't saved it, that evidence would be gone forever. But he did save it, and investigators were about to discover it. And when they did, it would shatter Alex's alibi completely. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. For 13 long months after the murders, from June 2021 to July 2022, Alex Murdaugh maintained his innocence. He gave carefully crafted interviews to local news media. He offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever killed Maggie and Paul. He attended their funeral services and delivered a eulogy that many attendees found deeply unsettling in hindsight. "Maggie and Paul were my entire world," he said through tears. "I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to find out who did this to them." Every single word a calculated lie. But while Alex played the devastated grieving widower and father, his financial empire was collapsing in spectacular fashion. In September 2021, just 3 months after the murders, the partners at PMPD confronted Alex about missing money. Gene Seckinger had been digging into the firm's accounts and discovered serious irregularities. Outside forensic accountants traced a stunning pattern of theft going back years. Millions of dollars stolen systematically over nearly 2 decades. When confronted with documentary evidence he couldn't dispute, Alex finally admitted to stealing from the firm. The PMPD partners immediately terminated his employment and partnership. They reported him to the South Carolina bar and to law enforcement. The Murdaugh name was removed from the firm. After over a century, there would be no more Murdaughs at PMPD. Alex's response to being caught and fired was genuinely bizarre. On September 4th, 2021, just 3 months after murdering his wife and son, Alex called his brother Randy and his surviving son Buster with shocking news. He'd been shot in the head while changing a tire on Old Salkehatchie Road. An ambulance rushed him to Memorial University Medical Center in Savannah. The wound wasn't serious, but it could have been fatal. Speculation ran wild. Who was trying to kill the man whose wife and son had already been murdered? Except there was no random shooter. No mysterious assassin. Alex had secretly arranged with a former client named Curtis Edward Smith, known as Eddie, to shoot him in the head on that roadside. The plan was for Eddie to kill Alex, making it look like a random attack so that Buster could collect on a $10 million life insurance policy. But when the moment came on that rural road, Eddie couldn't do it. He fired his gun, but the bullet only grazed Alex's skull. Alex survived. And when Eddie was arrested shortly after, he started cooperating with law enforcement almost immediately. He told investigators everything. Both men were charged, Eddie with attempted murder and insurance fraud, Alex with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Alex checked himself into an out-of-state rehabilitation facility for opioid addiction, issuing a carefully worded statement claiming his addiction had driven him to suicidal desperation. But investigators weren't buying it. They saw it for what it was, another scheme, another lie, another attempt to manipulate public perception. As Alex sat in rehab, more and more victims came forward. The Satterfield family discovered their $4.3 million settlement had been stolen entirely. Former clients realized their settlements had been diverted to Alex's fake accounts. The South Carolina Supreme Court immediately suspended Alex's law license. Federal prosecutors opened investigations. Dozens of criminal charges were being prepared. But the investigators working the murder case had made a breakthrough that would change everything. They finally decided to examine Paul's phone in forensic detail, extracting every piece of data, every video, every message. When they found that Snapchat video Paul recorded at 8:44 p.m. on June 7th, they immediately recognized its potential significance. This was recorded at the kennels right around the time of the murders. They extracted the audio. In the background of that 56-second video, you can clearly hear 3 distinct voices. Paul's voice talking about the dog, Maggie's voice in the background, And a third voice, a man's voice, talking to the dog, saying things like, "Hey!" Investigators immediately thought this could be critical. Who was that third voice? Investigators played the video for multiple people who knew Alex well, Paul's close friends, family members, people who had spoken with Alex hundreds of times. Every single one of them identified the third voice as Alex's without hesitation. It was unmistakably his voice, his way of speaking, his cadence. The video placed Alex at those dog kennels at 8:44 p.m. and 55 seconds on June 7, 2021. And if you look carefully at the video, filmed in portrait mode which captures a wider field of view, you can briefly see shoes in the bottom of the frame, Alex's shoes. He's standing right there while Paul films Bubba. This discovery was absolutely devastating to Alex's defense, because for 13 months, he had sworn repeatedly, under oath in depositions, that he was never at those kennels that night. He told South Carolina Law Enforcement Division investigators in multiple recorded interviews that he wasn't there. He'd told his surviving son Buster he wasn't there. He'd maintained publicly and privately that the last time he saw Maggie and Paul was around 8 p.m. when they mentioned they were going down to feed the dogs. He said he stayed at the main house. He said he never went to the kennels that evening at all. The video proved he was lying. He was absolutely there at 8:44 and 55 seconds p.m., just a few minutes before Paul's phone went dark. In that narrow window of time, someone had to retrieve 2 specific weapons from the main house gun room, return to the kennels, and execute 2 people in rapid succession. The only person who could have done that was Alex. There was no one else at the property. No mysterious stranger. No random attacker. It was Alex. He was there. He lied about it for 13 months. And now investigators could prove it conclusively. SLED constructed a timeline so detailed, so airtight, so irrefutable that no jury could ignore it. A timeline built from cell phone forensic data, GPS records from Alex's Suburban's OnStar system, cell tower pings, and every piece of digital evidence available. A timeline that proved beyond any reasonable doubt that Alex Murdaugh murdered his wife and son. On July 14, 2022, over 13 months after the murders, Alex Murdaugh was arrested at the rehab facility. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The arrest made international headlines. The untouchable Murdaugh family was finally facing justice. The dynasty was crumbling in real time. January 23, 2023. The Colleton County Courthouse in tiny Walterboro, South Carolina, is overflowing with people. The town has fewer than 6,000 residents, but today it's the center of the world's attention. News crews from every major network have descended. CNN, Fox News, Court TV, all broadcasting live. Netflix documentary teams are filming. The state of South Carolina versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh is beginning. Jury selection alone took 3 weeks. Finding 12 impartial jurors in Murdaugh territory, where the family name had wielded power for 86 years, was nearly impossible. Finally, 12 jurors and 4 alternates were seated. 7 men, 5 women, a mix of ages and backgrounds. Their names were kept confidential for their safety and privacy. Lead prosecutor Creighton Waters stands before the jury to deliver the state's opening statement. Waters is experienced, methodical, and devastating in his clarity. Alex Murdaugh murdered his wife Maggie and his son Paul in cold blood. Waters tells the jury, his voice calm but filled with certainty, why would a man kill his own family? Because he was about to be exposed as a thief and a fraud. Because the walls were closing in from every direction. Alex Murdaugh fooled a lot of people. He fooled his law partners for years. He fooled his clients. He fooled the Satterfield family. And he fooled Maggie and Paul too. They trusted him, they loved him, and he executed them to save himself. Over the next 6 weeks, the prosecution methodically presents their case. 75 witnesses, over 500 pieces of evidence. Forensic pathologists explain in graphic detail the nature of Maggie and Paul's wounds. They explain the trajectories of the bullets, how blood spatter patterns prove Maggie was running away when she was shot, that she was trying to escape, that she tried to hide behind a tree before the killer caught up to her. Cell phone forensic analysts walk the jury through the timeline step by step. Alex's phone goes silent at 8:09 p.m. for exactly 40 minutes. Then at the precise moment Paul's phone goes dark, Alex's phone springs to life and records 240 steps. The GPS data from his Chevy Suburban shows him driving away from the scene, shows Maggie's phone traveling with his vehicle, shows her phone being discarded along Salkehatchie Road. The evidence is overwhelming and damning. Paul's friends from the boat crash testify about Alex's controlling, manipulative behavior at the hospital, how he tried to coach Connor Cook, how he tried to protect Paul at all costs. The Satterfield sons, Tony and Brian, take the stand and break down completely while describing how Alex stole from them while pretending to help, how he looked them in the eye and lied for years about their mother's settlement money. Their testimony is absolutely heartbreaking. Maggie's sister Marion Proctor testifies, tears streaming down her face. "I trusted him with everything," she says, her voice breaking. "We all did. Maggie loved him. She believed in him even when they were having problems. She never thought. She never could have imagined." She can't finish the sentence. Several jurors are visibly emotional. The prosecution presents evidence about the blue raincoat found at Alex's parents' house. Testing showed gunshot residue particles on it. Alex first denied ever seeing the coat. Later he changed his story and said it might be his, but he hadn't worn it in forever. The changing stories, the lies building on lies. Alex's defense team, led by veteran attorneys Dick Harputlian and Jim Griffin, fight back with everything they have. They attack Sled's investigation mercilessly. They point out that the crime scene was contaminated, that evidence wasn't collected properly. They hammer on the fact that no blood was found on Alex despite Paul being shot at point-blank range with a shotgun. They suggest alternative theories designed to create reasonable doubt. Maybe someone angry about the boat crash killed Paul. Maybe Maggie was collateral damage. Maybe the real killer is still out there. Alex Murdaugh loved Maggie and Paul more than anything in this world. Jim Griffin tells the jury, "He's many things. He's a liar. He's a thief. He's an addict. But he is not a murderer." Then comes the moment the entire world had been anticipating. On February 23, 2023, Alex Murdaugh takes the witness stand in his own defense. Defense attorneys almost never put their clients on the stand in murder cases because it opens them up to devastating cross-examination. But Alex insists. He believes he can charm the jury. He believes he's smarter than the prosecutors. For 2 grueling days, Alex sits in that witness box. He looks directly at the jury as he tells his version of events. Yes, he admits he lied about being at the kennels that night. He was there. The video proves it. He can't deny that anymore. Yes, he admits he stole millions of dollars from vulnerable people. Yes, he admits he's an opioid addict. Yes, he admits he's done terrible things. But murder his wife and son? Absolutely impossible. Unthinkable. As I sit here in this courtroom and look around at the portraits of judges and lawyers who have served here, including my grandfather and my father, it's embarrassing what I've become. Alex says, his voice breaking. "I've disgraced my family's name. I've hurt so many people, but I would never hurt Maggie and Paul. Never. They were my entire life." He explains his lies about being at the kennels as the result of paranoia from his drug addiction and the panic he felt after finding the bodies. He claims his drug-addled brain immediately jumped to the conclusion that because of his financial crimes and the boat crash, he would automatically be blamed. So he lied about being at the kennels because he was terrified investigators would focus on him instead of finding the real killer. He cries multiple times. His voice breaks when describing finding Paul's body. The performance is compelling to some observers. His surviving son Buster sits in the front row, visibly emotional, supporting his father. As we continue, like, share, subscribe, and turn on notification. Until Creighton Waters stands up for cross-examination. And then everything changes. Waters is patient, methodical, surgical. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply and systematically forces Alex to admit lie after lie after lie in front of the jury. "Mr. Murdaugh, you lied to everyone about being at the kennels that night, correct?" "Yes, sir, I did." You lied to SLED investigators repeatedly over 13 months? Yes, sir. You lied under oath in depositions? Yes, sir. You lied to your law partners about stealing money? Yes, sir, I did. You lied to the Satterfield family while looking them directly in the eyes? Yes, sir. You lied to your own clients, vulnerable people who trusted you to fight for them? Yes, sir. You lied to your wife Maggie about your financial situation? Yes, sir. You lied to your son Buster? Yes, sir. Waters pauses after each admission, letting it sink in, letting the jury absorb the pattern. Then he asks the devastating question. Mr. Murdaugh, you've admitted to this jury that you're a liar, a thief, a con man, and a drug addict who has betrayed everyone who ever trusted you. You've spent your entire adult life lying and manipulating. So I have to ask you, why should anyone in this courtroom believe a single word you're saying right now? Alex has no good answer. He stammers something about wanting to finally tell the truth, about being sorry, about loving his family. Whatever credibility Alex thought he had is completely destroyed. On March 1st, closing arguments begin. Creighton Waters delivers a masterful 3-hour summary. Alex Murdaugh believes he's smarter than everyone else, Waters concludes. He believes rules don't apply to him because he's a Murdaugh. He lied and cheated and stole for years and got away with it. So when his crimes were about to be exposed, he thought he could commit the ultimate crime and get away with that too. He almost succeeded, but he made one crucial mistake. He forgot about Paul's video. He didn't know it existed, and that video destroys his alibi. That video proves he was at those kennels. That video, along with all the other evidence you've seen, proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Alex Murdaugh is guilty of murdering Maggie and Paul. After 6 weeks of testimony, over 500 pieces of evidence, and 75 witnesses, the jury retires to deliberate at 4 p.m. on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. Legal experts predict the deliberations will take days given the complexity of the case. But at 6:41 p.m., less than 3 hours later, the jury sends word to Judge Clifton Newman. They have reached a verdict. 3 hours. That's lightning fast for a murder trial of this magnitude. And everyone in the legal community knows what a quick verdict means. March 2nd, 2023, 7 p.m. The Culleton County Courthouse is packed beyond any reasonable fire code capacity. Alex Murdaugh sits at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly together, his face completely drained of all color. His surviving son Buster sits directly behind him in the front row, staring at the floor. Maggie's family sits across the center aisle, holding hands, some with their eyes closed in prayer. The jury files into the courtroom, and here's the critical detail that every trial lawyer knows to watch for. Not a single juror makes eye contact with Alex Murdaugh. Not one. They file in, they take their seats, and every single one of them either looks at the judge, looks at their hands, or looks at the floor. That's never a good sign for the defense. That's the jury's way of saying they've convicted him and they can't look at him. Judge Clifton Newman takes the bench. The courtroom falls into complete silence. Newman looks at the jury and asks the question that will determine Alex Murdaugh's fate. Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict in this matter? A middle-aged woman stands from her seat in the jury box. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The courtroom clerk stands and takes the verdict forms from the foreperson. She begins reading in a clear, steady voice. In the case of the state of South Carolina versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, on the charge of murder in the killing of Margaret Kennedy Murdaugh, we the jury find the defendant guilty. Maggie's sister Marion Proctor gasps audibly and covers her mouth with both hands. Others in Maggie's family begin crying. Some in relief, some in grief that it's finally over. Alex Murdaugh stares straight ahead, showing absolutely zero emotion. His face is completely blank, as if he's not even processing what he's hearing. The clerk continues. On the charge of murder in the killing of Paul Terry Murdaugh, we the jury find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupts in sounds of grief and relief mixed together. Judge Newman bangs his gavel multiple times calling for order. Alex still hasn't moved. Buster drops his head into his hands behind him, his shoulders shaking. On the charge of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime in the death of Margaret Murdaugh, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime in the death of Paul Murdaugh, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all 4 counts. The Murdaugh dynasty, 86 years of power and influence and control over South Carolina's Lowcountry, has just ended not with dignity but with a double murder conviction delivered in less than 3 hours of jury deliberation. It's over. Judge Newman schedules sentencing for the very next morning. March 3, 2023, Alex is brought back into the courtroom. Before imposing sentence, Newman delivers a speech that captures everything that needed to be said. Over the past century, your family, including you, have been prosecuting people here in this courtroom. Newman begins, his voice measured but filled with gravity. Many of those people have received the death penalty, probably for conduct less egregious than the conduct you've engaged in. The circumstantial evidence was so overwhelming that you committed these murders. The evidence of your guilt is overwhelming and, I would say, substantial. You've engaged in such duplicitous conduct here in the courtroom, here on the witness stand. I know you have to see Paul and Maggie during the nighttime when you're attempting to go to sleep. I'm sure they come and visit you. I'm sure they come and haunt you every single night. Judge Clifton Newman sentences Alex Murdaugh to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole on the 2 murder charges, plus additional time for the weapons charges. Under South Carolina law, this means Alex will die in prison. There is absolutely no possibility of release. Ever. The man who had everything, who came from legal royalty, who thought he was untouchable and above the law, will spend every remaining day of his life in a cell. As Alex is led away in handcuffs and leg shackles, he glances back at Buster one final time. Their eyes meet across the courtroom. Buster's face is wet with tears. He's lost his mother. He's lost his brother. And now he's lost his father to prison forever. The Murdaugh name that once commanded respect and fear is now forever associated with murder and corruption. Then Alex turns away and is led out of the courtroom. Gone. But the Murdaugh nightmare doesn't end with Alex's conviction for the double murder. Remember Gloria Satterfield, the beloved housekeeper who supposedly fell down the stairs in February 2018? In June 2023, 3 months after Alex's conviction, her body was exhumed from her grave for forensic examination. The original death certificate said she died of natural causes resulting from the fall. But here's the massive problem. No autopsy was ever performed. For a death that supposedly occurred from traumatic injury, the complete lack of investigation is highly suspicious. The Satterfield family, working with attorneys who had uncovered Alex's theft of their settlement, wanted definitive answers. Was Gloria's death really an accident? Or was she murdered too? An independent forensic pathologist conducted the examination. The official manner of death has been changed from natural causes to undetermined, pending the outcome of the ongoing investigation. If evidence emerges that Alex was involved in Gloria's death, he could face additional murder charges even from his prison cell. And then there's Stephen Smith, the 19-year-old nursing student found dead on a rural road in Hampton County at 2:30 a.m. on July 8, 2015. His death was ruled a hit and run by the South Carolina Highway Patrol despite multiple inconsistencies. There were no skid marks on the road, no broken glass, no paint chips, no vehicle debris of any kind. His head injuries, according to his mother Sandy Smith and multiple independent experts she's consulted over the years, appeared more consistent with blunt force trauma from being struck with an object rather than from being hit by a vehicle at high speed. His shoes were still tied on his feet. His cell phone was missing and has never been recovered. The last ping from his phone was near Murdaugh property. And in the original 2015 Highway Patrol investigation documents, the Murdaugh name is mentioned over 40 times by various witnesses and investigators. People in Hampton County clearly believed there was a Murdaugh connection even back then. Sandy Smith has spent years fighting for the truth, convinced her son was murdered, and that the investigation was intentionally botched or covered up. Rumors have always circulated in Hampton County about Stephen and the Murdaugh family, about whether they knew each other, about secrets that may have needed protecting. Stephen was openly gay in a small, conservative southern town where that made him a target for harassment. In March 2023, immediately after Alex's murder conviction put a spotlight on the Murdaugh family's decades of corruption, SLED officially reopened Stephen Smith's case as a homicide investigation. They announced they were investigating it as a murder based on information discovered during the Murdaugh investigations. What that specific information is remains sealed, but the implication is clear. Law enforcement believes Stephen's death is connected to the Murdaugh family somehow. Buster Murdaugh has publicly denied any involvement in Stephen's death through his attorneys. He has not been charged with anything and maintains he barely knew Stephen. But the investigation continues. Sandy Smith has crowdfunded money for an independent autopsy. She's demanding answers after years of being told her son was killed in a hit-and-run that never made sense. Today, Alex Murdaugh sits in Kirkland Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Columbia, South Carolina. He's in protective custody, separated from the general population. Why? Because even among criminals, family annihilators are considered the lowest of the low. Other inmates have threatened him, so he's kept separate for his own safety. He'll never walk free again. He'll never see another sunrise outside prison walls. He'll die in that cell. He works in the prison commissary making $1.35 per day. That's what the man who stole nearly $9 million earns now. $1.35 a day. He has 2 consecutive life sentences plus additional years from federal convictions for his financial crimes. There is no mathematical possibility of release. His surviving son Buster has reportedly moved out of South Carolina entirely. He's hired a high-profile defense attorney, despite not being charged with anything. He's trying desperately to escape the shadow of his family's name and the constant speculation about his possible involvement in Stephen Smith's death. The Moselle estate, that 1,700-acre property where Maggie and Paul died so brutally, sat empty on the market for 2 years before finally selling in March 2023 for $2.6 million, far below its assessed value of nearly $4 million. The buyer was anonymous and announced plans to demolish all the structures on the property. The buildings where the Murdaugh family lived will be destroyed. PMPED, the law firm that bore the Murdaugh name for over a century, formally removed the Murdaugh name from all signage and is now called the Parker Law Group. Several former PMPED partners have been investigated for possibly knowing about Alex's thefts and not reporting them. The firm has had to settle multiple lawsuits from victims Alex stole from. In Hampton County, where Murdaughs walked like royalty for 86 years, where their word was law, where their influence controlled everything from prosecutions to business deals to social standing, the family name is now synonymous with corruption, theft, betrayal, and murder. 3 confirmed deaths directly attributable to the Murdaugh family's actions. Mallory Beach, killed in a boat crash caused by Paul's drunk driving. Maggie Murdaugh, executed by her husband in cold blood. Paul Murdaugh, executed by his father. Possibly 4 deaths with Gloria Satterfield if evidence proves Alex murdered her to steal from her sons. Maybe 5 deaths if Stephen Smith was murdered as investigators now suspect. How many lives did Alex Murdaugh destroy in his desperate attempt to maintain an image of success and respectability? But perhaps the most haunting question, the one that keeps people awake at night thinking about this case, is this: how did Alex Murdaugh stand at those dog kennels on June 7, 2021? Look into the eyes of his wife Maggie and his son Paul, people who loved him unconditionally despite his flaws, and pull the trigger. Not once but multiple times. Methodically. How did he shoot Paul twice, completely destroying his son? How did he then chase down Maggie as she ran for her life and shoot her execution style? Prosecutors believe Alex saw Maggie and Paul not as people he loved, not as human beings, but as obstacles that needed to be removed from his path. The boat crash lawsuit threatened to expose all his financial crimes. Maggie was asking too many uncomfortable questions about money. In Alex's twisted, narcissistic calculation, their deaths solved multiple problems simultaneously. It was just another scheme in a lifetime of schemes and manipulations. Except this time, the stakes were 2 human lives. 2 people who would never have abandoned him. 2 people who trusted him more than anyone else in the world. 2 people who never saw it coming until it was far too late. That's the real horror at the heart of the Murdaugh murders. Not just that Alex killed. Not just that he killed his wife and son. but that he killed the only two people who still believed in him despite everything. Maggie might have been angry about the stealing. She might have been hurt and betrayed, but she probably would have worked through it after decades together. Paul was his son. That bond is supposed to be unbreakable. But Alex destroyed them both to save himself from consequences he'd earned through years of criminal behavior. And in the end, he saved nothing. He lost everything anyway. His freedom, his reputation, his surviving son's respect, and probably his love. His family name that he claimed to care so much about. And justice, delayed for far too long by power and privilege and a broken system that protected the Murdaughs for nearly a century, finally arrived. If this case taught us anything, it's that nobody is above the law anymore. Not in 2023. Not even families that controlled the justice system for generations. The age of powerful families operating with complete impunity is over. Technology has changed the game. Cell phones don't lie. GPS data can't be manipulated. Videos don't forget. And juries, when given overwhelming evidence, will convict even the most powerful defendants. Hit that like button if you believe justice was finally served in this case. Subscribe to this channel because we're diving deep into more cases where the powerful finally face real consequences for their crimes. The Murdaugh murder case may be closed with Alex behind bars for life, but there are hundreds more stories of power, corruption, and justice waiting to be exposed and told. And we're just getting started. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.